Khonshu I Játan kak turush wech safu. Khonshko imrolum lof emlufuk ethrush. Khonshu I etrufush ezafuk. Yabethmum rulum lofar nalar yakukam oramom laen I twako bathkorunu umaen omudafur. Iata bathmukam nel ichtavnu I qebuthumin ela nel yata qebuthumin yatan murok rukuth numlaen Iata bathko yatan tufshink makoshmah. Today I wanted to share my Conlang Dufir Yata, or Dufir for short, or simply Dwarven, which is a Conlang I started working on in 2020 and is probably the most developed language I've ever made. Unlike many of my conlanging projects, Dufir has roots in the novel I'm currently working on, so it's the only conlang that I'm somewhat obligated to work on. Dufir may not be a good representation of my conlanging potential, as it can get very messy, but it's still a language that has some interesting features that are still worth sharing. Before I get deep into the language, I want to address the orthography. I have an abjad that I've made 3 years ago, but I'm still trying to evolve it into a usable abugida, so when I finish that abugida, it will get its own video. For now, just know that the dwarves do have a writing system, but it won't be shared here. Despite that, there's still a lot to share and discuss. Let's start off with the phonology. Dufir has a pretty balanced phonology featuring 29 consonants and 5 vowels. However, each vowel can be nasalized or combined to create diphthongs, and in addition, all vowels have 3 tones. There's also a more prestigious and much older dialect spoken by rulers, scholars, and monks. When speaking in more formal contexts, speakers of this dialect enunciate and speak differentiating between all of these phonemes. However, native speakers of this more prestigious dialect don't often distinguish between all of these sounds, so this phonology chart is more of a prescriptive model. Another unique thing about this dialect in comparison to other dialects is its vowel harmony system based on backness and roundness. Uvular consonants serve as harmony blockers in this system, and the vowel a is an opaque vowel that does not spread any harmony. A allophonically backs to aw in back vowel environments. As for the grammar, Dufir is somewhat head initial, strongly dependent marking, highly irregular, and pretty agglutinating language that utilizes split ergativity and a triconsonantal root system. Starting with how nouns are marked, nouns are ambiguous to number and are assumed to be indefinite. In order to make nouns definite, one can use the definite article o before the noun it modifies. In addition to this, the prefix she could be used to specify there is exactly one of a noun. These two markers could be used together to make sho. O, she, and sho all become wa, sh, and shwa when a noun begins with a vowel. Dufir uses a triconsonantal root system to mark case on nouns. Not every word has 3 consonants, so words with 2 or fewer consonants may append ch on the front of a word if it historically began with a vowel, and sh on the end of a word if it did not. Words with 4 or more consonants may treat one consonant cluster as a single consonant, and of course, some compound words only conjugate the root word. There's a fairly consistent pattern to the triconsonantal root system, but several words may have their own irregular patterns due to sound change. A common example is any word with the suffix of. When conjugating the word chof, meaning surface world person, a rus appears seemingly out of nowhere. But this is because the suffix of evolved from Proto-Sylvan otfar, meaning person, which later evolved into ofar. In some conjugations of this word, a is lost, and in others, o is lost. And in conjugations where the a is lost, f and r underwent metathesis. And finally, r is lost in coda position before another consonant in the main dialect of Dufir. Unfortunately, idiosyncratic patterns like this appear all over the place in Dufir nouns, so speakers often learn the analogous regular pattern and quickly have to learn many irregular forms of nouns and verbs alike. Dufir has a bit over a dozen cases, featuring many different locative cases that specify the exact location of a noun in relation to another. All of the ablative cases come from the essive markers with the e prefix before them. The language doesn't have a dative case and makes use of the adessive for dative marking. Dufir also uses an equative case to indicate similarities of one noun to another. This is also a common strategy to make modern-day noun-based adjectival constructions. Dufir uses split ergativity based on volition of the subject. If the subject of an intransitive verb is unwilling to perform the verb, then it takes the absolutive case and comes after the verb. On the other hand, if a subject of an intransitive verb is willing to perform the verb, then it takes the ergative case and comes before the verb. Speaking of verbs, verbs in Dufir are a very bloated construction. Verbal aspect is a very old construction in the language and can be traced all the way back to Proto-Sylvan, back when the language was head final. And because of the many sound changes that Proto-Sylvan underwent to become Dufir, verbs utilize infix and other non-concatenative morphology to indicate aspect. Some verbs are unable to conjugate to fit the proper pattern to indicate each verbal aspect, so suppletion is used with the less synonymous verb in order to conjugate the verb in a pattern that would fit. On the other hand, most verbs have suffixes that evolved from auxiliary verb constructions. These suffixes encode verbal mood and agreement with the noun that takes the absolutive case. A noun taking the absolutive case must always directly follow a verb, and if a noun has an adjective modifying it, the noun undergoes entity movement in order to be next to the verb. These mood and agreement affixes can be stacked on top of each other when multiple apply, like in the construction dagin, meaning cannot. In regards to valency, Dufir does not have a suffix for the passive form. In fact, if a verb is passive, there is no suffix at all. The reason Dufir has a marker for active verb forms and no passive verb forms is because the active marker once served as an optative marker. The optative marker got reanalyzed as a volitional marker and then later reanalyzed as being the active verb form. So hopefully I eat got reanalyzed as I eat on purpose and then simply I eat. Keep in mind that a noun with the absolutive case that follows a passive verb does not follow the rules mentioned earlier. Finally, Dufir recently adopted tense prefixes kle and do, indicating past and future respectively. What all of this results in is a unique system of verb morphology where tense is prefixed, aspect is infixed, and mood is suffixed, all resulting from verb raising and a shift in the head parameter over the course of centuries upon centuries. Keep in mind, the canonical usage of aspect shifted once tense affixes were introduced. This chart indicates the combinations of tense and aspect and how they are used in modern day. It is also worth noting the most common verbs utilize the older method of conjugating verbs, which involved combining multiple aspects and reduplication. However, the messiness of the system is perhaps an indication as to why speakers began to employ tense prefixes in the first place. Last and certainly not least, Dufir's converbs are an important part of the grammar. Every converb can compare one action to another, whether one action has happened as a result of the other, whether one action happened in order to perform the other, or whether they happened at the same time. However, Dufir has a unique converb derived from its equative case, a converb which I will call the speculative converb, although I'm not sure if it has a real-world equivalent. The speculative converb is used to compare one action to another, similar to the construction as if in English. This can be used as a metaphor, or it can be used as speculation for reasons for one's actions. And that's all I have to say about Dufir. I've been working on this conlang for quite a while. However, most of the work was simply figuring out how not to be a bad conlanger. So because of that, there's still much work to be done on the lexicon and of course the orthography. If you've made it this far, then thank you for watching and thank you for taking the time to appreciate a project I've been working hard on. I plan on posting more conlangs in the future, and maybe more about Dufir as well. And of course, there's a certain circus man who I wish to make a conlang for. Until next time, thanks for watching.